Great when it's work. Our next speaker is Doug Carlson. He's a biologist with the New York State DEC. If you don't know him, you have not asked him to identify a fish for you, but he will talk to us today about endangered and threatened species in New York State. I'll stand at about 3 minutes left. And that microphone doesn't seem to be working.
Morning, glad you're all here. This topic is a favorite of mine, and it's got a lot of other issues involved, and I'm going to dodge around a lot of them, but the first, if you ask the question when, it probably includes the why, what, when, and where also, and mostly dwelling on the when, the process. So when have endangered species or threatened species, and I put them both together because I don't think they're very easily distinguished between the two. When do they get down classified on a state list or on a federal list? Federal, of course, is another thing I'm staying quite away from, but it's never happened in New York that we've moved a fish from threatened endangered down to something less, but we've only had the process happen once before, and it might be happening again for opportunity. And then politics are involved in endangered species. Certainly at the federal level we become aware of it. Civil servants might be the main decision makers, or appointed officials. It's a process that lots of people are engaged in and trying to make it work the best they can. And the long and the short of the definition, it being something I'll get to in a minute here, but when they're soon to be gone, no longer soon to be gone, that might make you think they should be removed from the list. Black button shuts it off. That's good. Endangered species comes down to some very simple words: imminent or in the very near future to become extirpated, and then threatened is just one step down from it. Some people say it's likely to become endangered in the near future, or you can just put it into a later time context of soon, not in the immediate future. And extirpated, different from extinct, of course. In a particular state, if it's gone, we're calling it extirpated, or in a particular watershed. And there are several fish, when you get down to the watershed level, that have been extirpated. And when they're completely gone from the state, we would say that's extirpated across the state. Down classified is a process, I guess, that we haven't seen in many instances, but when you feel that it's no longer those categories above, you'd think that a move would be afoot to no longer have it classified as threatened or endangered. What are the candidates that might be down classified, or what are the fish that are presently on our list in New York? As there's 19 of them. The list comes from quite a ways back, and I'll get to that in a minute, but the yellow highlighted species are those which are already extirpated or have always been extirpated for over 50 years, always, I mean. And in the darters, there's one that's been gone for a long time, the gilt darter. The sunfishes, the mud sunfish has been gone. So we have quite a diverse list of fish that have gotten this special attention. And some of them, like the deepwater sculpin, look like a blob when you take them out of the place that they live. The upside down ones are ones we haven't seen for a long time. The silver chub's been gone since the 30s. And the sand darter, not too highly recognized fish that people have seen it, I mean, but it's a beauty of a fish. The history of our endangered species classification for the state started back in 1983, and a process for reclassifying it started not a terrible time long later, just those 7 years later. That the process was started with expert panels meeting, and it was quite a stretched out process before those decisions could be put into law, but it was a very well-rounded process, I guess you'd say. A lot of people were involved, and opportunities for continuing review of it. They got put into our law, as I say, in 1999. And the second process has been intended to get started, and perhaps will start in the coming year. The process by which it might follow is the criteria that people often use, or the metrics. Is it still there? Is it not there as much as it used to be, and what's likely to make it be disappearing. The threats are often hard to identify, and we're pretty good at saying afterwards, it looks like that was it, but during the process it usually happens so quickly that you just grasp at what else has changed, and maybe you put an assignment on it. As you'll be hearing later from Dave Sanderson, how the long-eared sunfish or the northern sunfish is hard to put your finger on what might have caused the demise of certain species. We just don't know a lot about what's going on with those species. So the next process for reclassifying, if it's in this year ahead or perhaps the year after, it probably really heavily depend upon published reports of what's going on for that particular fish. And we don't see a lot of reports for these fish. One of these two fish I'm going to be talking about, we don't see many reports about the sand darter, the status of a fish. Lots of times there'll be science about a particular fish, but it doesn't get to the real technical, is it disappearing or is it increasing? We more study the special details of what's going on in its life in the best areas that we can find to study them. So the reports that might be coming for this process are underway, and as you'll be hearing later more about deepwater sculpin, there's a lot known about it, and it's really encouraging news, and I'm going to be giving more encouraging news for these two species that I'm saying are good candidates, and more about that in a minute. So some questions about what controls the process. Why are fish down classified? When should we be encouraging the process? Who's to benefit by a fish being down classified or being classified up to a higher level? And there are groups that favor no change. Preservationist groups often are outspoken, or just special interests often recognize this powerful process of protection, something they can intercede with and persuade the process the direction they want it to go. In some of the states near us, as Ohio and Pennsylvania, have both down classified a darter that's blue breast darter, not very widely known, but it's a spectacular fish, and there's such a pronounced increase across both of those states where this fish previously occurred and where it's now able to be found, that it was an easy process for them, I might say. I don't really know what their process was, but the evidence is overwhelming that some fish have just had such increases, and those states have processes that have probably been exercised regularly, so they just moved them up in the last year to have blue breast darter no longer being endangered or threatened. And what interest groups do we have out there? If you're working with a group of birds, you can certainly appeal to the bird groups to help you out on giving an animal particular extra protection. If it was a lamprey, as the northern brook lamprey might need protection, you have to hunt a long ways to find a group that might want to help you protect some like those. Or maybe there would be some groups that would help you down classify them and get them off the list so they can be managed a little more effectively. And I'm appealing to this group as our parent chapter of the American Fisheries Society has a pretty big role in the federal classification of fish particularly. They publish lists fairly often of what that group of professionals as a committee deliberates on, and of course they have lots of scientific reports to help guide them. When should fish be put on the list or taken off the list at the federal level? I think there's some intuitive or some instincts we have to give animals more protection, and it's maybe at the times we're in that there aren't many emotions moving toward less protection, and yet I'm appealing that that should be an equal balanced kind of set of emotions, that when people see that there's good evidence for a fish to be down classified, then it takes a little more inertia to get it moving because it's a rarely exercised process to down classify. And if you have experts examining the material available to them, or if you have a model, which has often been the case, that there's some kind of combination of metrics that go together and they come up with a number and it says this group of animals with this score should be no longer classified or should be classified. And models are only as good as the critiquers, the people reviewing it, that really want to put it to the test. And we've had good experience being able to modify those models as they've been created for us. So now on to the second part of the talk that gets out of the political process and gets more to the scientific. I think we're more comfortable with what does the data show. And the two examples I draw from, one of them is really data rich in recent times thanks to the USGS and our Ontario counterparts that are studying this big water. I really like this genus name, Myoxocephalus or cephalus. How can you go wrong with such a group of letters like that? I haven't heard it spoken very often, but it's something about its head, I guess. You'd think if it's down deep, its head might be squished a little bit, and the pictures make it look pretty squished up too. This Thompson guy, this fish has also historically been known in marine areas, so there's been a taxonomic shifting of some of the things about deepwater sculpin. You can see I'm trying to be more relaxed now because I'm out of the political process. It's just about the fish. And the eastern sand darter has been studied a fair bit in New York, certainly a fair bit in other places, but it's not highly renowned. It's a beautiful fish that dives down into the sand, and certainly that habitat, it might be more connected to that than all the other fish that we put names on that make you think it ought to be where it is by name, but not necessarily holding true very often. So a short story about deepwater sculpin. A year and a half ago I got to go on a cruise with the USGS out from Oswego, and the deep water that they went to, down to 100 meters where they started catching them, brought up lots of other fish, lots of other animals, not so many other fish. We had a trawl haul. Some of them came up with lots of persimmon mussels, and then others didn't have so many, but this haul had maybe 30 or 50 deepwater sculpins mixed amongst those mussels. Borrowing some information from the USGS, the graph on the lower right with really intense effort in the last summer showing how broadly across the lake they are, east to west, north to south, and even some in the shallower part to the eastern basin. But 100 meters is a figure that they like to say is a good working term, and also found deeper in the lake. And this previous sampling on the graph to the left, methods weren't as well refined as they are now, but there were a few records in the early years, and thanks to the museums that archived them, we have just a few records going to a lot of records is the gist of this, and then a little graph representation of the longer time span on the graph to the left over all the years, with a few very low bars in the 1910s and the 1940s, and then this rapid increase, which is explained a little more detail in the lower right, where the bars are with more years of sampling, and it's the number of records. If you go out and run 20 tows, and each one of those is considered a record, you have a certain number of fish in each tow, but this is not number of fish, just number of sample efforts. So a really large number in recent years, over 200 samples in that time unit of 3 years. Now to jump on to the other fish, which is in several parts of New York, and historically, which is just in a few parts, and it's in small streams. It's in Lake Erie, and the places we have known of them in the blue, the two streams to the left, Cazenovia Creek and Cattaraugus Creek, were where sand darters were caught before 1900, and sampling wasn't very thorough then, of course, to all the places that they might have been. In the 1930s, there's another stream highlighted over there. It's not really highlighted. Little Salmon was caught, was a place, so we have this is some repetition of the same information that the early records from Cattaraugus Creek and Cazenovia Creek, Buffalo area having lots of changes, Cattaraugus Creek also having lots of changes in those years of the early 1900s, and they were never caught there again. Little Salmon River on the short bar there had them caught in the 1930s, and they continue to be caught today. And all these additional streams that the previous slide showed, the Oswegatchie grass and tributaries of some of those, the Deer River tributary of St. Regis, the Boquette River had a sand darter record from just 3 years ago for the first time. Those at the south end of Lake Champlain have been known for only 20 years, 20 to 30 years. And Lake Erie has had some sampling complements to the trawling and seining along the shores of Lake Erie that have had them up to, for the last 15 years. And then to generalize a little bit, what's brought about the recovery of these species? And or as I said earlier, what accounts for a species to disappear from our detection level. It's hard to say what's making them come back. It's easy to say water quality improvements, and in the case of the two habitats, there's been lots of changes in 50 years. The streams, we have further insight about the sand darters, currents in some of the streams south of Lake Champlain that has been said that back in the 30s there probably wasn't that much sand there on the benthic surface where otherwise it might be covered with silt. So the sand might have cleaned up over the periods of less deforestation and better land use practices. But it's still just, we're not sure, and we're not even sure how to measure the magnitude of habitat improvements. It's easy to say that we've got this fish that's returned, and that's quite a quality measurement. The sand darters are in 15 streams now instead of the earlier record of only 3, and deepwater sculpin are caught in hundreds of trawl pulls out in Lake Ontario. So to pull it together in the final sense, the protection of species by an endangered species law is a very powerful tool, and it helps us with lots of habitat protection, certainly not only for these species that it's directed at. And we're very glad for the tools we have to keep our habitats from degrading further. Initiation of the process for updating the fish in New York is far overdue, and many people are working rigorously to get engaged in perhaps in the next year or the next couple of years. And the two species that I've summarized the information for, there's been such dramatic changes, and there needs to be reports, scientific reports, that put this in the management perspective. Not only can you catch it in more places, and particularly how one depth might be different from another, but an overview kind of report that says the species across the state has had these dramatic changes, and to make a sort of a judgmental call to say that it looks like it's not going to disappear in the near future. And groups can enlighten themselves and encourage others to get reports done. It really boils down to the scientific process of saying, here's the data, and then the deliberation process can rely upon those published reports. So some credits that I need to extend to others that have participated in, certainly the study groups that have collected this information, and the extent of the Rare Fish Project that's been in place for over 20 years. And Dean Boughton was the leader of that effort that gave us some, certainly gave us some management plans or recovery plans for some of the species, and some programmatic plans for the project overall. And then all of the records that we have. New York has such a rich history of fish records, and we're so lucky to have this Woolman that did the sampling back before 1900, and the universities that keep collections where we can answer our questions of what did it really look like, the fish that was back in 1930s. Was it really a deepwater sculpin? So that covers it. Any questions?
For a couple questions for Doug.
So Doug, what are the metrics that New York has used up to this point to classify species as threatened or endangered?
Well, I'm not very familiar with what happened in 1983. There were reports put together that, I guess I wouldn't say reports, summary documents for each species, and a lot of those have still been retained. And then in the process in 1990, a group was pulled together of interested experts, and they called them dossiers, or packets of information for each species, and the groups talked about it for a day, had summaries, and then it was acted upon. The process that might take place now could follow a process that was started a year and a half ago. We had a process for species of greatest conservation need, and that information and the way those groups deliberated is available, might be used, probably will be used to some extent, but there might also be another group that has to be assembled. So we're hopeful that it'll be started, and questions, it's good to ask questions of agency folks that are closest to having that put in gear. So a lot of these fish just haven't been popularly talked about, whether the gravel chub, 1 out of 100 people have heard about gravel chubs, and it's very narrowed in its distribution, and other fish are pretty widely spread as perhaps pirate perch should be elevated in our thinking. Well, not many people have handled pirate perch either. Thanks for your attention, and I hope people direct more efforts toward these species.
Thanks, Doug.